content rather than creators should be at the center of the creator economy. I think that helps to give a better baseline understanding of what it is that, the creator economy is all about. Is, of course, it is creators who are producing this content, but it's that content that's being viewed, it's being monetized, and it really does form kind of the foundation of the entire ecosystem.
Explore the minds and marketing strategies behind today's winning brands and businesses. Tap into the power of the creator economy with Earned by CreatorIQ.
Hi, welcome back to Earned. Thanks for being here, Jasmine.
Thanks so much for having me back.
We're also here for a very specific reason. We are a few weeks out from releasing our 6th annual State of Creator Marketing report. It is an industry report of a global survey that we work on with a research partner, Sapio Research. 1,700 global marketers answer and really just want to get a pulse for what is going on in our industry. We talked last time about the rapid pace of evolution and change within the industry. And our goal in this survey is really to get a snapshot, yes, of what's going on today, but really take a forward focused look at what is going to be happening tomorrow, the next day, and into the next year and beyond, as again, this industry starts to evolve and shape in even new ways. You are the perfect person to have this conversation with. Give a little bit of background refresher, who you are, and what brings you here today.
So I'm Vice President and Principal Analyst at eMarketer. I lead our coverage of social media and the creator economy. And I think we talked about last time how one of my first ever reports, if not my first report, was on Cambridge Analytica. So I have been doing this for quite a long time. I am very excited to partner with you again. CreatorIQ's annual research has been really important in the work that I do. I cite you all the time, primarily because it's great to see sort of year over year trends among marketers and how they're approaching influencer marketing.
I appreciate that and love that and agree. I think that over time comparison has been really interesting. It's one of the most interesting things, I think, in this year's report specifically. When we spoke at the beginning of the year, you talked to me about how you termed this year the year of professionalization. I want to start the conversation there because I think a lot of what we'll talk about today in terms of the research really validates that kind of banner for the year. Explain to me again what you mean by year of professionalization. What did you expect to see this year shaped into?
I probably should have called it the era of professionalization, because it is certainly going to take much longer than a year to fully professionalize the industry. However, we have started to see really big steps in that direction. And what I meant by that when I said it was that we're just seeing marketers become more sophisticated with their strategies. We're also seeing creators get more serious about their businesses and more sophisticated. We also talked about how we're seeing more professional industries and professional creators, especially in the B2B space, start to lean in. And so this is really happening from all different angles. And it's really just leading to a more established, more sophisticated, and more serious industry than it has been ever before.
A lot of the findings from the report really led us down the same road. And what we're terming the report is really that we're entering the era of efficacy. I want to start with the state of investment. What we saw last year in the report is that over the last 4 years, investment had increased by 143%. Year on year, that is increasing above the average this year. So 171% year on year growth for investment in influencer marketing. So the state of investment is strong and growing, 171% year on year, with 2/3 of that budget being reallocated from paid, digital, and traditional media.
I would absolutely agree with that. And the research that I've been doing fully confirms the trends that you're seeing. Spending continues to rise. We're seeing influencer marketing growth really outpace growth on virtually every other digital channel. We're also expecting US creators to generate more in sponsored content revenues than YouTube will generate in net US ad revenues this year. So that just helps show how critical they really have become to marketing strategies. And social ad spending and influencer marketing to me really are two sides of the same coin, right? We're also expecting social video ad spending to surpass linear TV ad spending this year. And that is a huge shift in the market because linear TV has long been the dominant medium. And there's a ton of reasons for why this is happening. Creators, though, are a big one. People are spending so much more time on social video platforms, whether that's TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And, they see that content from creators primarily as being more relevant, more relatable than a lot of studio produced content. And we've seen a mindset shift among marketers that is now translating into an ad dollar shift. Then it's not just the halo effect, really, of creators being on these platforms that's driving spending growth on social platforms. We're also seeing creators now directly contributing to social ad spending growth. As you said, a lot of this increased budget is being shifted from digital and traditional channels, but it's also being repurposed as digital paid ads, right, on the social platforms. So we've seen a huge increase in Meta's partnership ads, which allow advertisers to boost or amplify creator content as paid media. We saw YouTube really focusing recently on scalable partnership ads themselves. And of course, there's TikTok Spark ads. And this is really changing the makeup of influencer marketing budgets. And I think that's one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing right now. Paid ads, of course, speak the language of media buyers, and it gives a much easier story to tell to CFOs who are wondering about the efficacy or effectiveness or efficiency of influencer marketing.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. We're seeing a lot of that as well. And I think when we get into not just the channel dynamics, but where creator content is showing up, that really doubles down on your point, which is creator content is showing up across a lot of these kind of more traditionally approached, traditionally minded mediums. Whitelisting has always been incredibly important and impactful, but the role of creators in media is changing, whether that is showing up in actual, like traditionally produced TV creative, which we're seeing, right? Look at the Super Bowl this past year. Saw creators all over the screen, behind the camera, in front of the camera, seeing that more and more, but also really take center stage across a lot of the content that brands would have traditionally produced themselves. So creative supply chain, completely agree, has changed. Media dollars, and I would actually say with the media dollars that are leveraging creator content, I would venture to say that these investment numbers are actually underreported, given the lack of clear distinction between paid content and creator content used in media. I think the other thing that's really interesting about what you said is the roadblocks, the challenges that we are facing today, and this is kind of onto our second topic, have changed dramatically. So up until the past 2 years, so last year being the first year this change, resourcing and budget was always a top roadblock for marketers. But this year and last year, we have seen measurement, right? A focus on efficacy. As we said before, measurement has really taken top billing when it comes to challenges marketers are facing today. And again, you mentioned the CFO, the role of the CFO, it's increased, right? With great power comes great responsibility. That apples to apples language becomes significantly more important. So I'd love to hear more from you around that roadblock of measurement.
Yeah, I mean, that shift is something that I've covered extensively in my research this year, and proving ROI of influencer marketing is now the top priority for pretty much every marketer who I speak to. Similar to your saying, what I always say is that bigger budgets mean bigger demands for financial accountability. And then if you add on all the economic uncertainty this year, that really just has accelerated the need for marketers to show tangible business results. As for, budgeting and staffing, which used to be the biggest roadblocks to influencer marketing, according to your research, I think brands really have already gotten smarter and more sophisticated in their strategies. And I think a lot of that also has to do with time and experience, as well as the buy-in that they now really do have from the C-suite. So that has helped solve some of these early problems. And now for me, and for the marketers that I speak to, measurement really is the missing link in unlocking more budget. I think a lot of brands are still relying on outdated or misaligned metrics, both to identify creators who they want to work with, as well as to measure the success of their campaigns. I do think that there is a broader understanding now in the industry that follower counts are not the best predictor of business performance, but they are the metric that many marketers end up falling back on because most of the metrics out there, again, are misaligned, incomplete, or they just don't know how else to measure because there is no standardized measurement framework for influencer marketing. That, again, is because it's really complicated. Influencer marketing has become a full funnel marketing tactic, and people are using it for goals from brand awareness to consideration all the way down to sales. It's also used across so many different platforms and so many different channels that it becomes really hard to have this industry-wide framework for how you measure the success of a creator partnership or a creator campaign. That said, I do think that brands can standardize internal processes. And I think one of the best ways to start doing that is making sure that you are aligning your business goals with success metrics right up front, and then continuing to build and iterate on that strategy with those goals and success metrics in mind.
And that comes with understanding the landscape, right? Where are you relative to your industry, your competitors? What is the perception of your products, your values, right? How are you connected to the community? It's not as linear or direct as a lot of people think. You mentioned follower count specifically. I want to jump into a piece of our research that came out this year as well. We have been very bullish on a content first approach. The social media platforms, TikTok For You page really kind of set that standard several years ago, but I think everyone is really catching on in terms of content is driving one community, but content is really driving consumer interest. It's what we see, it's what we engage with, it's what we get served more of. And so that content efficacy becomes much more important. As follower count falls from favor, and the rise of kind of creator suitability or fit for brand comes up, I do still think that there's a really interesting dynamic or play there with creator fit in a content-driven world. Can you unpack that for me a little bit?
Yeah. So first of all, I wanted to respond to what you said about content, right? And I actually just wrote a report really arguing that content rather than creators should be at the center of the creator economy. I think that helps to give a better baseline understanding of what it is that, the creator economy is all about. Because of course it is creators who are producing this content, but it's that content that's being viewed, it's being monetized, and it really does form kind of the foundation of the entire ecosystem. And also to your point about, sort of just more understanding among marketers, I think they also need to know that, outcomes may not be immediate. We did some research earlier this year that shows that people need to see a creator recommend a product 3 to 4 times before making a purchase. And I don't know how many times I've said this, but the path to purchase is not linear, and creators play an incredibly strong role. But again, it's not one-to-one. It doesn't necessarily immediately lead to purchase.
There's a really interesting juxtaposition between the role of content first, but then the fit of the creator, the suitability of the creator. Content and creator, how do those two things kind of fit together, play separately? How do those two things reconcile in your mind?
I think for so many years, we talked a lot about brand safety, right? And I think you're right to say that the conversation really now has shifted from safety to brand fit or brand suitability. And there's a lot of reasons for this. One, many brands already have established enterprise level standards that they use. They also have established vetting practices. And with the exception, I think, of brands in highly regulated industries or those with decades of brand equity to protect, I think brand safety was an easy thing to fall back on when they didn't want to invest in a tactic that was largely unproven. That's just not the case anymore. And so instead, what I'm hearing, even when people say brand safety, what they're really talking about is brand suitability. And I think a lot of the reason for the shift in conversation from brand safety to brand suitability or brand fit has to do with the fact that, we are putting the content first.
creator suitability or fit for brand was the number one reason for selecting new creators to work with in the survey this year. So 22% of respondents said that was the number one kind of criteria for selection. The second was content performance. I hear you saying those two things are somewhat linked, right? It's content first, but the creators create that content. And so really understanding the story of the creator, the history of the creator from, I think, yes, like a baseline safety standpoint, but then also from a suitability standpoint. And I actually think suitability and safety are more interchangeable than we might think. Safety in the traditional sense is not safe for work, right? Is there anything in this creator's, in this person's history, in their content that I would not want to align my brand with? But suitability is my tolerance for that. If I'm Red Bull or if I'm Capri Sun, I have two different tolerances for what is suitable or safe for my brand. And so I do think that they play together when we are talking about, safety. It really is important as more dollars go into this, as creators show up in media more and more. I think not just the protocols on the brand and organization side, but also on the technology side will have to rapidly evolve to be on par with what you see with paid media today and safety standards, protocols, triggers, et cetera. But to your point, that suitability is incredibly important because, again, that risk tolerance differs. The last is actual fit. And that, I think, is what you're talking about. How does the story of this creator, the content they create, and my brand overlap? How can we build something that is authentic, engaging, et cetera? So I see those all kind of on a spectrum, if you will, like safety, suitability, fit, all live together.
They absolutely do all play into each other. And one of the things that, I've been thinking a lot about too, is now that we're talking about creator content, especially on YouTube, being akin to TV, right? And YouTube, for example, is trying to get TV advertisers to advertise against its content. I think one of the challenges there, although there are many, I just wrote a big report about why YouTube creator content both is and isn't TV, is the predictability and the brand safety that comes with sort of pre-programmed content on linear television that you just really don't get with creators. Yes, some of them are able to plan in advance, but because of the nature of their businesses, many of them aren't able to stick to a predetermined slate of programming, and that causes more sort of brand safety as well as suitability and brand fit issues.
And then also just to give a bit of a kind of look back. So this year, follower count was the 8th criteria for selecting a creator partner. In our early surveys, it was number 1. So again, how the mighty have fallen. Okay, so moving on, can't have a conversation today without talking about AI. This, I think, is a fascinating topic, especially in our world in creator marketing, where it is incredibly human-centered and human-driven. We've always talked about, the role of creators or the efficacy of creators being because people trust people, they want to learn from people, they want to hear from people. But AI is coming in and really accelerating the potential, the power of the people who are doing the work on all sides of the creator economy. The stat that really stood out to me in our research is that 95% of brands and 97% of agencies have used AI in marketing. I don't think that is groundbreaking, but 69% of those organizations were in favor of fully automating their creator marketing. I'll introduce a bit of a caveat to that in a second, but pause there, talk about automation and the role of AI in, again, a very human-centered industry.
Well, I think there's so much ambivalence toward AI in the creator economy. And I put together a spectrum kind of similar to your brand safety versus suitability spectrum about AI and place all the different creator economy stakeholders on it. And if you look at it on a spectrum, again, from fear to excitement or concern to excitement, you really see creators and platforms occupy the respective ends. But even among all of these individual stakeholders, there's so much nuance. And so let's take marketers as an example. What I see in the research and in my conversations with them is that they simultaneously want more and less and AI in their work. I think, they're more reluctant to use AI in some of the more human-centric parts of influencer marketing, particularly things like creator discovery and vetting, which was a really interesting finding for me because for so many marketers, it's still a very manual process. But one of the things that I think is leading to this perception is that brands already have a lot of established partners, especially those that have been doing influencer marketing for a long time. And also because there's a lot of nuance, again, to things like brand suitability, brand safety that, AI just can't detect without human intervention. On the creator side, I do think, many of them have adopted AI tools. I think ultimately AI will just become another tool in a creator's toolbox for content creation. Right now, it's scary because it's new, but eventually it won't be. And I think a lot of the concerns around AI taking their jobs still exist, but are less prevalent than before. And now they are far more concerned about things like increasing competition, copyright infringement, deep fakes, and even brand misuse of their digital clones. But again, most of them are using AI to some degree, again, showing these very nuanced feelings and behaviors toward AI.
I agree. So nuance is a good word to use. So I said earlier, almost 70% of organizations are in favor of fully automating kind of their creator marketing workflows. But if you unpack that a little bit, so on the organization side, and then we can talk about creators, but on the organization side, they also say that AI should not fully replace managing creator relationships, right? So that human to human interaction, brainstorming and ideation, so creativity. Creator discovery was the third, with 33% of respondents saying that AI should not replace creator discovery. So exactly your point earlier, generating content, writing briefs. So I think for me, what's interesting in that is that we want to understand and harness the power of AI, but we don't actually understand, I think, the role of automation or unlock. So when I think about creator marketing workflows, it encapsulates all of the areas that our survey respondents are telling us we don't want to fully replace with AI. That is the workflow. So if we automate the entire workflow, it would be creator discovery. It would be managing creator relationships, interacting with them. So I think finding that happy medium of where can, again, AI augment that kind of human interaction, that human touch is incredibly important versus replace. And where we're putting a lot of our kind of time and energy is really on the ability for AI to leverage our structured data and bring it forward to enable faster and more informed decision making. So it's still human decisions, but really fueled by AI digging into a depth of knowledge that would be very time consuming for any of us to do.
I also tend to take what marketers and consumers and creators really say about AI with a grain of salt. I think there is, a kind of shame in saying that you don't use AI or you don't know how to use AI. And I find that people aren't really willing to admit that. So it doesn't surprise me necessarily to see, such a large number of respondents say that they want to fully automate the process. But when you dig deeper, there's a lot of parts, if not the entire process, that they would want to keep as being human-led. I think we see this all the time in broader marketing research too, where you'll have a lot of respondents saying they're using AI. And then when you drill deeper, they're really not, or they're using ChatGPT the same way that they might use Google, for example. I wrote a post about this on LinkedIn not too long ago. It was right after Cannes Lions, actually, just talking about the difference between what you hear on stages about how people, companies are using AI and what you hear in private conversations. And a lot of times there's a disconnect. And I think it boils back down to, this broader fear of admitting that I don't really know what I'm doing with AI yet, because everybody else seems to have it all figured out, but they don't.
Yes. None of us have it quite figured out. I think on the creator side too, really interesting. So again, overwhelming majority of survey respondents, creator survey respondents reported having used AI for content creation, but they don't want it to replace their voice or likeness. So really having kind of integrity and ownership over their likeness, their content, their IP, if you will. And so my voice or likeness as a creator, number one response where AI should not fully replace filming or recording themselves, engaging with their audience. Again, that interaction, so incredibly important. Again, everyone's using it or reporting using it, but when you unpack that a bit, there's still some real hesitation around kind of the role it should play in the day-to-day for creators.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that hesitation also comes from consumer receptiveness toward AI generated content. There was a media firestorm not too long ago with that AI influencer. I think her name was, I wrote it down, Mia Zilu, who was supposedly at Wimbledon. And I think, brands don't really want to be caught up in a media firestorm like that. That said, many of them are interested in and exploring both virtual influencers and digital clones. And I think that that's really scary to a lot of creators, again, who are worried about brand misuse of their image and likeness. I also think, brands assume they're going to be able to cut some costs by going the digital clone route. And so, I think there's still a lot that needs to be figured out there. And there's so many different moving parts and sort of feelings and receptiveness toward AI.
In our own data, we see a pretty wide delta actually between engagement rates over kind of human creators at large and AI creators or avatars. Again, people are really curious, they're interested, but that engagement is very surface level. It's kind of a peak versus like a sustained relationship or set of engagements.
I think part of the beauty of creators too is that people are along for the full story, right? They are following and engaging with the person as well as the content. So one of my favorite examples of this is Jules LeBron, who started the very demure trend on TikTok. And when she got her first brand deal with Verizon, there were so many comments of people who were just overjoyed that she was able to score a brand deal. And so they were truly happy for her and following her journey. And we're not at a place yet where people have those same feelings toward AI influencers.
Agreed. Talk to me about the kind of big three, TikTok, YouTube, and Meta, and how you see that evolving in terms of the way marketers and creators are using those platforms.
In our research, Instagram is still by far the number one most used platform for influencer marketing, but both TikTok and YouTube have started to slowly close the gap. For a very, very long time, Instagram was sort of the anchor, as I called it, for influencer marketing strategies. It is a comfortable, familiar place for a lot of brands. Most of them are already advertising across Meta's platforms. It also offered so many different types of content formats. You could have static posts, videos, stories. And so it was an easy place to put budgets, and they were seeing good ROI, right? I think with the rise of TikTok, then a lot of brands started to pivot to more TikTok first strategies. There has been a little bit of a pullback on that, not on TikTok overall, but in this idea of being TikTok first because of all the turmoil and uncertainty. However, we have not seen, any drop off in terms of marketers using or adopting the platform for influencer marketing, nor have we seen a decline in influencer marketing spending on TikTok. With YouTube, that has long been a white space for influencer marketing. This year, we're actually predicting that 50% of US marketers will use YouTube for influencer marketing for the first time, which is a huge milestone in our forecast. I think Shorts has had a lot to do with it. It's an easy entry point for creators. It's also an easy entry point for marketers who want to work with creators. Some of the things that have held both creators and marketers back, in fact, is at least these perceived difficulties with long-form content, resources, skill, cost, right? YouTube creators tend to charge more than creators on TikTok and even Instagram. And a lot of that has to do with the type of content they're creating. But I think these broader advertiser and consumer tailwinds toward YouTube really are prompting more marketers to take YouTube seriously as an influencer marketing platform. And YouTube is also taking itself seriously now as an influencer marketing platform, which at the very least will help onboard and educate more brands.
Yeah, they actually just reported out, I think, $100 billion paid out to creators and media companies over the last, what was it?
I think since 2021.
Yeah, which is wild, right?
Yeah. YouTube has long been the most coveted platform for creators in terms of monetization capabilities, because it's one of the few platforms that actually has a somewhat sustainable and reliable monetization program. Overall, it is kind of best in class when it comes to helping creators monetize and build their businesses.
Okay, let's talk about some different channels. One, you mentioned B2B creators at the beginning of this conversation. LinkedIn is popping up. So behind the kind of mainstay social platforms, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and X, LinkedIn is a solid, sixth? Actually ahead of Snapchat, which was interesting to me. So let's talk about LinkedIn and Snapchat for a little bit. Definitely different in terms of their role in the ecosystem. I agree. I'm very bullish on kind of B2B creators and the role of that. What do you see on LinkedIn, and how is that starting to kind of impact or influence the broader conversation?
Well, LinkedIn is certainly having a moment, and they are doing whatever they can to capitalize on it too. LinkedIn has shifted from being a purely professional social network to a more quote unquote traditional social network. People are sharing a lot more personal content on the platform. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the pandemic blurred the lines between, our personal lives and our work lives. And building a personal brand has become critical, right, to career advancement. And there's really no better place to do that than on LinkedIn. Then there's also a ton of creators who kind of straddle the line between B2B and B2C. And that's really helping, again, bring more marketers, more brands into the fold of influencer marketing. And then on the B2B company side, the B2B buyers are getting younger. They're spending their time on social media. They're also looking to make purchases from people for B2B, or at least be part of the decision making there. And so I think that's kind of changed the language and the nature of B2B marketing, and it's shifted it more towards creators.
Snapchat also, I think we anticipate seeing continued increases. Again, campaign inclusion on our platform has increased pretty substantially over the past couple of years. They're investing a lot also in creators properly, but it again functions very differently than the other platforms. I think that's one to watch. Pinterest also in certain categories is really interesting in our data. Again, I'm kind of walking through like the stair step of usage, the most commonly used social platforms for creator marketing. But if you had to place a bet on any one platform, not the major three, any one platform to kind of come in a big way in 2026, what would it be?
I've been bullish on LinkedIn for a long time. I've wrote my first article about how LinkedIn was, kind of taking over in the B2B world with influencer marketing back in 2023. So, I think that's going to continue growing in 2026. I do see a lot of potential for Snapchat, but so much of that also just depends on, advertiser sentiment and interest in the platform overall.
What's your take on the latest headlines, and what are the latest headlines? What do we know of TikTok today?
Well, today was supposed to be the deadline again for the sale of the TikTok ban. That, of course, has been extended. The Trump administration has said they have a framework for a deal with ByteDance in China. The details on that are still pretty scant, but several names of potential buyers have been released, including Oracle, which already has a data partnership with TikTok, so that was unsurprising. We really don't know what the structure of the framework is going to look like, and that's sort of the big question for me. We did find out, however, that the algorithm will be licensed. If true, it sounds like the algorithm will remain the same. One thing we don't know is whether it's going to be an entirely new app. TikTok did refute a report by Reuters earlier this year saying that it was building a new app, but all of that still remains to be seen and worked out.
And so it goes.
So it goes. The bigger takeaway from me here is, as of yet, nothing has changed for consumers, creators, or marketers. I think I said this 9 months ago when we were talking about this the first time. It still pretty much seems as if it's been business as usual, except, of course, the brief shutdown in January. Advertiser investment, of course, fluctuates based on seasonality. But overall, the trends toward TikTok have been strong. We haven't seen any massive drops in user engagement. Creators are still creating content for the platform. So until we have confirmation of what this is going to look like, it's very difficult to make any predictions in terms of what is going to happen.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so taking that, we won't make a prediction around TikTok specifically, but I do want to end the conversation with a bit of a prediction. We talked already today about rising investments around the role of suitability and fit versus follower count, right? The changing dynamics of content first. We talked about the role of AI and technological advancements and what that means in a human-centered world. We talked about channel dynamics and the kind of emerging presence of some players who have been nipping at the heels of some of the dominant channels like Meta, specifically Instagram. Again, a lot is changing. I want to hear from you looking into 2026. What do you think will not change? What is your prediction around what will stay the same, stay the course?
I think we're going to continue to see more investment coming into influencer marketing. I think we're going to continue to struggle with many of the same challenges we've talked about today in terms of fragmentation, measurement. I do think we're in a better place now than we were even 9 months ago, but I still think there's a lot to be worked out. But overall, I think the sentiment toward influencer marketing will remain strong and the dollars will continue to follow.
I agree. I think the thing that never changes, the constant, is people trust people. I think that's why this industry works. And I anticipate, with the kind of operational sophistication and maturity that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, that there will be more ways for creators to help brands and businesses solve problems. So I expect to see creator content in more places with more investment behind them. But I also anticipate that the ecosystem that exists around them will make great strides in truly helping to solve some of the challenges that we talked about, measurement, standardization, efficiency, and then ultimately kind of coming back to the era of efficacy, being able to truly put this forward and not just this works, but the kind of incrementality of what creators can bring to the table.
Absolutely.
That is it. I think that's a good place to leave this conversation for today. It was so much bigger and broader than I anticipated. Thank you for winding down these roads with me. Again, a lot more to come with our State of Creator Marketing report, which launches October 1st. So thank you so much for unpacking this with us today and looking forward to even more to come.
Thank you.
Be a friend, tell a friend, and subscribe. Earned by CreatorIQ. CreatorIQ is your all-in-one solution to grow, manage, scale, and measure your influencer marketing program. Ready to unlock the power of the creator economy? Get started with a demo today at CreatorIQ.com.